Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
And you're welcome to the Over the Line Extra GAA podcast here on Galway Bay FM. Well, after the game against Cork last weekend, Galway now find themselves out of the National League, but they do have a big game now coming up against Clare in 2 weeks. I'm delighted to be joined by former Galway Manager Micheal Donoghue. Micheal, I suppose the question all hurling fans in Galway are asking is, where are we at?
I think from early on the league, Sean, it was really evident that Henry and the management team were going to be looking at a lot of younger players. I think they're in excess of 34 or 5 players used throughout the league, and I think they will have seen a lot of young players. I think some young fellas would have put their hands up, and I think equally different teams, I think, have a different approach on the league and maybe wanting to have a block of training or a block of work to be able to do that before the championship starts. So I think, I think they'll be content enough in that they have that block. They have another game against Clare and will maybe be able to use it for different lads coming back or to look at other young lads again.
Yeah, and I suppose, I think, as you say, 35 used, 9 debutants. But I think also there's kind of a bit of a trend, Micheal, because if you look at it, we'd say, I think 5 lads have started the 4 games to date. You have Jack Grealish, Thahi Burke, Pádraig Mannion, Ronan Glenn and Tom Monaghan. And then you have, I think it's 8 lads that have started the 3 games. Éanna Murphy, Fintan Burke, Conor Cooney, Jack Hastings, Cathal Mannion, Conor Wheenall, Geraghty, McInerney, Joseph Cooney. So there does seem to be kind of this, from looking at the 4 games so far, you kind of see who they're kind of aiming at, don't you, too?
Yeah, you do. There's lads available, but, I think the key thing is, and maybe from a supporter's perspective, is, when we're looking from the outside in and you don't know what's going on in training and you don't know what lads are carrying knock. So I'm sure there's been a few games where the lads would have liked to have looked at different fellas and maybe they just picked up a knock the night before. We've seen it with Conor Whelan before the second last game there. Do you know what I mean? So you just don't know what's going on, and they have gone to, there are 7 or 8 lads that have featured a good bit in games, but I think the key thing to remember is that you're always trying to get as many lads up to the same level as possible going into championship. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's why they've looked at a good few lads, and I think in fairness to some of the younger fellas, like you're looking at Tiernan Clean the last day, or Ronan Glennon, your message always to a young fella is, just go out, fit in, don't try and overkill it. And I thought, Tiernan Clean is doing the simple things really well and putting in some really good performances when he's called upon.
I suppose Ronan Glennon with those 5 points. Tom Monaghan, you had him in 17. It's good to see him coming back, isn't it? Because there was a year or two there where he wasn't part of the panel, and I suppose even in a week he was taken off at half time against Wexford in the last round. But last Saturday evening in Cork did well with the 4 points in that wing forward role.
Yeah, he did, and look, he's someone that we brought in. He was probably just really unfortunate that he got a bad groin injury, and in fairness to him, he's worked really hard for the last maybe 2 years, and his club form last year totally warranted him being selected and being brought back in, and his performances have been really good, and that wing forward role has evolved so much over the years, and you want someone that can work up and down the line, and Tom is doing that, and he's also chipping in with a few scores again on Saturday night. And as you mentioned, Ronan Glennon has started a good few games. Had a great game on Saturday evening there, chipping in with five points. So he's definitely putting his hand up as well.
I suppose, Micheal, we left Cork last year, didn't we? And I suppose what I'm asking here is, how much can you trust the league? Because Galway seemed to be in a good place and then went on, and the 2 championship performances were disappointing. But even last Saturday evening, would it be fair to say that it was a loose enough game at times? It was almost a challenge game at times, and Cork's setup is now very pronounced, we know that. But is it hard enough to still draw definitive lines from these games?
I think first and foremost, and maybe we should have mentioned it at the start, I think for everyone involved in Galway, particularly for Henry, it was really hard, I know Henry wasn't there, and to extend our sincere condolences to the Shefflin and McCarthy family for the loss of Paul Shefflin. And when you're involved in a setup, Sean, like management and players, you really, really have a tight bond, developing and growing, and the respect the players would have for Henry. His loss would have a big effect on the group, because they would have felt it for Henry. And for me, looking at everything that transpired from Thursday, the GA we talk about, it's made up of our communities and our clubs, and to the main of that are different families. And for me, I personally would have thought that game should have been called off on Saturday evening as a mark of respect to Henry, the Shefflin and McCarthy families, because that's what the GA is all about. Like, and such tragic circumstances, it is hard to go out and prepare for it.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. When the game was played, I don't think there was huge intensity. There wasn't a huge intensity in it, and I think it was just fairly open. Do you know what I mean? And I think that happens maybe with Cork. It's very open. I think it's very, very evident that they have gone away. They've worked and looked at maybe particularly the All-Ireland final last year where they were ripped apart. That my view on them when you're looking at them was they didn't play as one. They played more as individuals than as a team. And I think throughout the league, culminating in the Limerick performance, that they showed that they're working really hard. They crowded the middle third, still trying to play their expansive running game. I thought on Saturday evening it was open, but I thought maybe for periods in the first half when we were going long, we weren't getting much joy. But I thought then, particularly in the second half, it was obviously addressed at half time when we started moving the ball through the lines. We caused a bit of trouble as well, and got some good scores. So I think the fact that we scored 20 plus, was it 24 points?
23, yeah.
23 points, still good shooting. Like, so I think the biggest thing is you need work on. So whatever game plan or tactics the boys are trying to devise, you want to see in each game, are you going out trying to implement it, and you'll be taking small shoots from each of the games, even if there is a step back in a defeat. So I think there's still a lot for Galway to take out of it, but still a good bit of work to do as well.
Reference, and obviously, as you said, our total sympathy to the Shefflin and McCarthy families, and I'm in full agreement with you. I think the game should have been put off, particularly Micheal, given the fact that next weekend is a free weekend in the National Hurling League. I think that it could have been facilitated that way. The other thing, a few interesting points you're bringing up there in terms of the setup and in terms of Cork setup, but obviously we're looking at the maroon and white setup. That the two-man full forward line looks like it's in now, isn't it? And one of the things is the quality of ball into that at times. Like Galway shot 18 wides in the game, so they were obviously creating scoring opportunities, but the quality of ball into, we'll say, Conor Whelan in particular, is one thing that will be a work on, won't it?
It will, but I think a key thing you have to remember is particularly towards the latter stages of the league, getting ready for championship, and maybe because we're 6 weeks out, you can take a week to 10 days off that, because you're not going to be going too much into it. Like, so you're down to 4.5, 5 weeks big preparation, and you want your big players playing, to time the run on it. And I think Galway have just been a bit unlucky in that, if you go back to even say the Offaly game, and I did it with you on the radio, you Brian Concannon and Connor, like when the two of them are together, it's a totally different dimension up top. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
the
it's
runs
really
they're making, they're on the same wavelength.
They're on the same wavelength. Their movement, they play off each other, and because both of them are equally good, high or low, to give you that big advantage. And I think when you take one of them away, it is hard. You take Wheelo on Saturday night, like I thought, there was a lot of ball going in. Teams are so mindful and respectful of him, and recognise the threat that he brings, that, there's always two or if not three, and we've seen that even go back to the Limerick game. Occasionally there was four lads around him. So it is really hard on him in that regard. So I think the biggest thing for Galway over the next few weeks is to try and get as many of the more experienced fellas back and getting into a rhythm of getting the ball into the full forward line as quick as we can, because we've seen when those two boys are on it, they're a huge threat. And as you said at the outset, like the game has evolved. It's nearly 2 inside, or like 2.5. When you're pulling out one, it just solidifies the middle third, getting bodies in there. So you can see a lot of teams are using it, aren't they?
Yeah, and I suppose developing that team then as well. And look, it was thrown at you as well when you were Galway manager that we don't score goals. I mean, I think it's no goals now in the last 3 games. We did get 4 against Offaly, but what you're probably going through there now is probably part of the reason for that too, that the goals, we don't seem to be creating. Well, we did have Jack Hastings was winning goal, Johnny Cohen late on, but probably the more work you do with that up top will probably lead to the creation of goals, and maybe support runners coming through to help a Beano or a Conor Whelan inside too.
Yeah, but look, it's no, you can put it into any team sport, like, it's same in soccer. You know what I mean? If you want your big boys up top to be at the end of it when you're scoring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think, we will see a change when the lads are there, and it's big ask bringing in young fella. And I think the key feature of the league as well, Sean, is when you're in that management position, you really want to be playing more experienced lads with some debutants or some newer lads.
Yeah, right mix,
just to give them a bright opportunity as well, because you want to see them playing with your more experienced players, but equally not to put such a burden on a young fella coming in. Do you know what I mean? That it's not the expectation or pressure on him to do it all on his own on any given day. So I think you're looking for that mix and that balance every day you go out.
Yeah, that was probably something that we saw in the World Cup game, particularly against Dublin. It was a lot of inexperience together. I suppose looking at Cork and reflection to Galway, Ger Mellerick's role now, Micheal, he seems to be tagging the respective centre forward almost. The Shane Barrett, who was a centre forward the last day, seems to come out a little bit. Mark Coleman back into the pocket then as a kind of a playmaker. That's probably something too that a lot of the teams are doing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a +1. Like, so if you talk about Cork, like, go back to the All Ireland last year, they got opened, and it was probably a big discussion in terms of in the build up to the game, how would Cork evolve around the Limerick machine and Keane Lynch in particular, because he's the fulcrum of their attack, and he was exceptional in that game. And as I said, we spoke about a few minutes ago how Cork have evolved over the off season and how they're trying to do things in the league. And if you watch the Limerick game on Limerick's first puck out, or Cork's first puck out, you'd seen Ger Mellerick coming across to take up Keane Lynch.
Yeah.
So that's just the midfielders staying narrow, watching a centre forward that's coming deep, and it allows Mark Coleman then to sit, or if Limerick are attacking, then that he's being tagged and Mark Coleman can sit back. It's just you don't want your centre open, Sean. That's what it is. There, you're trying to minimise the space between your half back line and your full back line, but particularly down the middle, you don't want to get opened up, because if you do, that's where the goal chances and overlaps come.
And I suppose, and we saw that with Coleman notching the 2 points from centre back the last evening. Goals, Micheal, definitely look at one stage at one side we're not scoring, but I suppose we have conceded a few sloppy goals that you would hope would be eradicated by the time the championship comes too.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at them, it was probably more individual errors, and I think that they will get eradicated by the time the championship comes around. I think you can see even in the games that were on yesterday and over the weekend that the intensity levels are going. You can see lads that are getting to the pitch of nearly championship pace, and I've no doubt even for Galway going into the Clare game, I know it's a dead rubber, but you want to be looking for that intensity and work rate and making sure that that's there in that game, getting you ready for a championship.
And the Limerick game was the real game. We saw that from Galway thus far, hasn't it been?
It is, but I think with Limerick, it's very evident they have the target on their back. I think they're really struggling for form. Yeah. I know the general public, myself included, you're probably giving them the benefit of the doubt and that they will turn it around, because you cannot doubt them. I think Kyle Hayes has picked up a hamstring injury reportedly. It's bad enough, so he could be ruled out for a long time. So there are 1 or 2 injuries to them. There's definitely a dip in form, and they've been on top of their game for the last few years, so it will catch. The whole pack is chasing. The longer it goes, everyone has seen the way they play. and trying to stop or match them in that middle third. And I thought, Galway did it brilliantly. The evening they played them down in Limerick, like you have to work so hard in that middle third and not let them build from the half back line through Declan Hannon and Kyle Hayes. And, we did that really well that evening. But it comes back to the key thing, Sean, is work rate, attitude, and with that comes consistency. And if you get that on a regular basis, that has to be the criteria for every day we go out. If we do bring that, we know we have the hurlers. And if we bring the work rate, our hurling will follow.
I suppose the one word that hasn't really been mentioned a lot, Micheal, since Henry come in is transition. It's fair to say Galway are in transition, aren't they? I mean, one stat of the team that started last Saturday evening against Cork, only 5 of that team started against Waterford in last year's championship clash. So now obviously some players came in and all that, and we've obviously Joe is gone, Aidan Hart is gone, but there is a period of transition here, isn't there? There's a patience element needed too, isn't there?
No, absolutely, and it has to be recognised and acknowledged. You know what I mean? I think the problem is once championship starts, we're all judgmental. We all want success now. Do you know what I mean? But we are 100% totally in a transition period, and you can't. There's two sides of it, Sean. You can't discard the more experienced fellas, where some lads might, some sectors might in the general public be saying, he's done, he's gone, he's finished, but you need the experience, right? And I think there's huge experience in that group and lads that are still really hurling well and lads that are going to be needed. Equally, when you're looking at the younger player coming in, the physical aspect of inter-county senior hurling has just gone through the roof. So bringing an 18, 19-year-old and expecting him to come to that level instantly is a huge ask. Do you know what I mean? So from experience, we would be saying, there's a 2 or 3 year window required there to get them up to the physical side. You know what I mean? We can see, we spoke about Tiernan and Killeen, we spoke about Glynn, like they're going really, really well. But, you can see from the Walsh Cup to the league, there's a huge step up to the latter stages of the league. Yeah. It's getting, and then that is ramped up another 3 or 4 times come championship. So it's a huge ask for any young fella, but equally they have to be afforded the opportunity and given the time, because that's only where they're going to get their experience.
Right, I've saved the best question to ask me, the hand pass. Mother of God, we've seen an awful lot of them blown through the Walsh Cup, through the Fitzgibbon in particular. I think the Fitzgibbon final, Fergal Horgan went hand pass crazy. We saw it again over the weekend. How do you decipher for a hand pass?
I think it's very hard.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen over the last number of years, Croke Park or the powers that be look at the games. So just so the general public know, I'd imagine on a weekly basis after each game, the referees are called to Croke Park for a meeting to assess how games went during the week or on the previous weekend. So with that, if there's a contentious decision or a sending off, that's discussed, or maybe, is there a feature of the game that's becoming an issue. So therefore, hand passing has been highlighted over a period of time, that, the difference between a throw and a hand pass. And look, you can see it over the weekend. Even if we look at it this weekend, there were definitely ones that were throws.
Yeah, there were,
you know what I mean? And I have huge sympathy for refs, right? But the sympathy sometimes is outweighed, because if you're just told to go look for it, you're going looking for it. And then, like you've seen Seamus Harnady's one probably was a prime example of that, where it was a perfectly good hand pass. But you see, I think when you're talking about it, Sean, maybe
it's in the minds.
It's very, like, the game has moved on, and the game is played at 100 miles an hour now. So if they're waiting for someone to stop to do it, like, it's not possible. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the gap between the hand and the ball has reduced significantly to do it to be able to do it much faster. Do you know what I mean? So look, there is an issue because there is throws, you know what I mean? And I see, look, I'm heavily involved here in our own club with the young fellas, and you're preaching to them that, there has to be an action, there has to be a distinctive gap between it, because lads are just throwing it. So it's a big issue, but hopefully the trend of, looking at stuff and being really harsh on the league eases up to the championship. And but look, players have to be mindful of it as well, in fairness. But it's do you want a game of if it continues the way it's going, there's going to be a lot of frees, isn't there?
There is, and I think you'd nearly have to bring in VAR to look at every single hand pass if you're going to go that way. But look at it, and obviously there's a lot of throws, as you said. It does need to be cleaned up. Looking forward to maybe you might head into the refereeing role long term, maybe, whatever. No thanks. Micheal Donoghue, former Galway Manager. Listen, thanks for chatting to us here on the Over the Line Extra GA podcast, and thanks for your thoughts.
Now this week on Over the Line Extra, we're in Tuam to talk to the new Football Committee Chairman, Micheal Geraghty. Micheal, we're meeting here in the Ardry Hotel in Tuam, where you're very much well known and respected for many, many years. But what's your background?
Well, I'm originally from Ballinasloe, Ollie. I came to Tuam in 1993. My wife is from Tuam, Margaret, and we settled here after we returned from New York. We were there for a couple of years, and I got involved in Tuam Stars fairly quickly after arriving. I met Alan Talty, I think, down the post office and mentioned I might be interested in doing some coaching. Started off, I think, with an under-12 team. And I think I stayed with that team all the way up along until we played in 2 minor finals. I think it was 2004 and 2005. I progressed from there, as you do, to become secretary of the club and then chairperson of the club for a couple of years. And then I was elected coaching officer in Galway, and that's how I got involved with Galway County Board. And I've been involved there I was coaching officer for 5 years, and then John Tobin took over from me, and John got appointed to Dublin to chairperson of coaching in Croke Park. So I was involved in management as development officer, and I was asked by Pat Carney to step back into the coaching role again. So big background in the coaching side of things, and would have been involved with various other teams in Tuam Stars as well over the years. And the academies, of course, at underage would have done a bit of coaching with them as well. So, that's the background, Ali.
I suppose it's a big jump then from coaching to becoming the chairperson of the football committee, and in many ways in old money we all think back to the likes of Pat Egan in the football board and the kind of work that he did. The landscape has changed somewhat though since that time.
Yeah, I suppose under the late Noel Tracy as chairman of the county board, more of the power was vested in the county board, and both boards then became a hurling subcommittee and a football subcommittee of the county board. There's still the same kind of work has to be done, the same kind of people are involved. It's a voluntary based organisation, obviously, and you're right, things have changed and we have moved on. There's big changes obviously in both hurling and football this year with myself coming on board as chairperson in football, Claude Gehigan in hurling with Damien McGrath there, and in football we have Pádraig Kelly coming in as secretary, and we have PRO John Gillespie from Oughterard, and Brendan McBride is in as the vice chair. So big changes in personnel, I suppose, really. That is true.
A lot of that, of course, is down to the 5-year term that most officers at a max can now enjoy, if that's the right word. I suppose from your point of view, do you have to assume you have a 5-year term and set out your goals accordingly?
Yeah, you're selected, and I suppose you would presume you're there for 5 years. There's a lot of work involved in it. It'll be interesting to see how many survive the 5 years, but that would be the plan. We'd set out, and we'll set our stake for 5 years, and we'll start off. There will be changes, obviously. We'll have a different approach than maybe was done in years gone by, but still it's the same job of work that's ahead of us, and we have to work with the clubs and promote the game of Gaelic football in County Galway. It's a big task. It's a big county, and there are 44 clubs, and they all have various different needs. And then you have the whole county set up as well, and we have our underage, and I have good knowledge of that from my own coaching and games background. We've probably changed in the way we do our work a little bit. We move away from the committee sort of based systems and move towards maybe working groups where we get people in for a specific task, appointed to that, and we'll get results based on that, and we move on. But having said that, I'm kind of mindful that we don't want too much change either. Like, it's not like everything is bad about the way things were done in the past either. Obviously, Galway is a very proud county. You mentioned Pat Egan and former chairs of the football board. They achieved a lot in their time, so we don't want to take any of that for granted, So we're going to build on that, obviously, and everything has changed, obviously, in the last couple of years. technology will dictate that we can do things differently as well in our communications. We don't have to have meetings. We've been doing it for the last 2 years during the pandemic. We can have Skype meetings or Teams meetings and stuff like that. We probably don't have to meet up as regularly, although people involved in Galway GA probably meet 6 and 7 times a week anyway at games and everything else. As you know yourself, it's the same faces you see around the volunteers that are involved in the organisation.
You use the word build, and I suppose that's an appropriate time to bring up what everybody seems to talk about in Galway is the lack of facilities, and we've seen in recent years all the hurling teams using Lough George along with the football teams, and it can get very crowded up there. The lack of lights, I suppose Tuam Stadium, we're right beside it here where we're doing this interview as well. So maybe let's start there because we're in Tuam. I mean, there was a recent announcement of just shy of 300,000 from the Sports Capital Fund. How quickly can that be spent, and how quickly can we see work again happening in Tuam Stadium, because it seems to have just stalled a little bit in recent years?
Yeah, I suppose a combination of the pandemic and funding and everything else, there is money left aside there from the late Joe O'Toole, which was accepted thankfully from he was a great man to give that kind of money towards Tuam Stadium. And then this extra boost of the capital sports funding is going to get that project up and running very, very shortly. I'd say there's a group set up under Mary Judge in the infrastructure committee, and she has some expertise on that group now that are in there, and they're going to work, I'd say, very, very diligently in getting it'll be the number one project in Galway, I would imagine, going forward. So I would expect that we will see progress in Tuam Stadium very, very shortly. And I think then once we see that kicking off, the people of the area will row in behind that project again. So, you know, it's a big, big project. It will take time, but I think once we see it started, it will roll on from there.
When you say shortly, are you expecting in this calendar year that we could see the old stand knocked?
I would hope so, yeah. I would hope that once it goes out to tender, that'd be the first thing we'd see come down would be the old stand, and then replacement of that. And there's other phases to that project as well. There's some capital sports funding remaining to complete a referee's changing room in the new section of the stand there, and hopefully eventually we'll see that covered in time. Another part of it, as you mentioned yourself there, was probably, and maybe more important, is getting lights for Tuam Stadium, you know, because we have no football pitch in this side of the county, or indeed in the county. There's permission for lights there applied for Tuam Stadium, so hopefully if we can develop that, it'd be lovely to think that we could have Dublin and Galway playing National Football League Division 1 next year, although Dublin may be coming down, but we hopefully will be going up. It mightn't happen, but we could have Kerry maybe or someone like that on a Friday evening. It's a big thing now, isn't it, for families to go out on a Friday evening to games in the winter time under lights.
So is the lights thing strictly down to money, our planning? Because we heard plenty of promises about lights a couple of years ago and nothing has happened, so you can talk about pandemic and all of that. But if the money was there, can the lights go up quicker than in a lot of other places where maybe there has been issues with planning?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that there won't be as the issue of getting planning permission for Tuam Stadium for lights. As you referred to, maybe Pearse Stadium, there are issues, and there's cost implications in Pearse Stadium for the kind of lights they can put up in a built-up area, I guess. Whereas Tuam Stadium, it's in a different area of the town. And I don't believe we'll run into those difficulties in Tuam. So I'd say the chances of seeing lights in Tuam Stadium is a reality that we can look forward to.
And of course that's just one element of it. Then you look at the bigger grounds. In a moment we'll go on and talk about clubs and their facilities and how active you'll be at trying to promote those. But Lough George again was built primarily with just football teams in mind, in terms of, you know, allowing minors, under 21 seniors, whatever it might be. But now there's a huge raft of teams. I mean, you've been up there many an evening. I'm sure you're looking at 8, 10, 12 teams trying to access it. What's the future thinking? Or is it a case that that's more of a county board issue now than a football?
Yeah, it is really a county board issue. We have facilitated the hurlers up in Lough George. It is a busy place with hurling and football. It is manageable and they are managing it, but like without going back into Mountain South and all that went on and that, there were plans for having 2 venues, obviously. In Lough George, Lorunid was always the football venue going back. But, you know, the hurlers are being facilitated there just as well as the footballers at the moment. And it is only for those darker evenings in, you know, the months of January, February, March. Once they're gone, we get the evenings back. We have great facilities around the county. In fact, some of the clubs have better facilities than most counties, and there are plans for huge developments in some clubs in this county at the moment, as you well know. So Yeah, I see your point. There probably is a very strong case for having two venues if the money was there to do it. The money isn't there right now, but into the future I would imagine that that's what we will see.
Congress was held last week, Micheal, and there was much talk, of course, from the hurling context about Galway having to reduce their championship to 16 teams from 24. Not quite the headache for the football, but you will still have an impact on this year and next year's championship.
Yeah, I suppose in the last couple of years football has addressed that issue, and they brought their numbers down in the senior championship, and it had been steadily decreasing, and we're going towards the 16 that's now coming in by rule. Obviously hurling have a bigger headache trying to reduce some 24 senior teams down, but you'll have to discuss that with Claude and the lads later. But so we're probably in a better place in that regard with reducing the teams down, and it will give us probably 16 teams who are fit to be in the senior championship, and that may give us a better championship. Now I would argue we've had a very good championship in recent years, with the emergence of Moycullen, Montbellion, Mylock, and perhaps Tuam Stars nearly getting there a few years ago as well, breaking all our hearts down in Tuam Stadium. And in light of that, Corofin and all the great work they had done in previous years, they've probably risen the standards for those top half dozen, 8 or 9 teams, and the rest then are trying to get to that level as well. A lot of great work going on in the clubs, let's be honest about that. Club structures are very good. A lot of great people working voluntarily as secretaries, chairpersons and treasurers in clubs, and being very progressive in developing their facilities through sports capital grants, training facilities. We spoke about lights earlier. A lot of our clubs have actually lights on their pitches and have their AstroTurfs and stuff like that. So we're very lucky to have the calibre of volunteer working within the club at the moment. And as you know, Ollie, every club sets out every year to win the senior championship when they're in senior, intermediate if they're intermediate and so on, and only one club can win the championship, and that's the reality of the competition.
So 16 you think is a more reflective number about the competitiveness. Are there even 16 competitive senior teams?
Well, most clubs would be realistic to know that their chances are long shots to win the championship when they set out, but they'll still set out every year and set their stall out, and we've discussed teams that will upset on the day, will take a big scalp, and that can happen, and that's what keeps us all involved and keeps us all interested, and we don't want to sort of kill that within the clubs either by saying you haven't a hope to win the championship. People go out to slay the giant every time they enter the competition, and we'll have our upsets. Now, being realistic, we've seen the half dozen teams that will realistically contest the senior championship in the end when it draws down. But that's the nature of competition, the nature of life. They're the strong and the weak.
Well, the nature as well of population movements in recent years tell us that more to the periphery of the county you go, the less dense the population are. So inevitably we've seen in recent times amalgamations. Is that how your thinking may go as well? Is it just a reality of life in rural Ireland that club amalgamations and big population bases like Clare-Galway, Salt Hill, Oranmore for instance, that they're only going to get bigger and stronger?
Yeah, that's the reality we're looking at, Ollie. The demographics are there, and we can see that. You can see the number, especially at underage, the number of students that are starting with, say, a national school in some of our rural clubs. They may only have a couple of students starting, and there'll be multiples of that inside in the big areas in Clare-Galway, even west out in Moycullen, Killannon, Oughterard. These areas are growing as well. Oranmore, anything in around the city, their population. Now that brings challenges as well for those clubs, let's be honest. They have to provide extra teams, extra coaches and all of that there as well, and playing opportunities for the young players within those clubs, Now, the amalgamations have worked out fairly well for a number of clubs here in North Galway, where they can now be competitive when 2 or 3 of them come together to provide playing opportunities for their younger players. You may look at the Kerry model of divisions maybe going forward, and this kind of thing is what really is ahead of us in Galway football, and our committee to sit down with the clubs obviously and maybe come up with a plan for the next 5 years and see where we can get to. These things need to be brought out and discussed with people who are in the clubs, who are active in the clubs, who can give us their feedback, and we'll take that on board. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll set up a working group. I do plan to actually do a review of the clubs, getting in contact with them, finding out what their positions are and speaking to the clubs, because I think, the knowledge is out there. It's just a matter of us correlating that and bringing it together and coming up with a plan going forward for Galway GAA. And they may involve amalgamations, and it may involve whatever the clubs think is best for themselves, really, at the end of it.
And yet it is a numbers game, is it not, Micheal? I mean, I'm sure you can make a convincing argument to some clubs who may not want to hear what you're going to say, but people of a certain generation will always want to maintain a senior status, and yet the results down along the line with underage teams playing in C competitions may suggest that you just don't have the playing population and start looking elsewhere. Is that a difficult conversation to have with some clubs?
It can be. It depends on the clubs themselves, but the clubs know best themselves on the ground. When they know they can't field a team, when they're running into, as you said, the numbers game, they realise, look, we're going to have to just come together with our neighbouring club, and at least we'll have the numbers then to compete, and they can go back into their own clubs then as they bring players through, into senior, intermediate or junior ranks. It's very, very important. Now, we've seen a huge swell in junior football in the club, Ollie. I mean, the number, I think we've 24, 26 junior C teams entered this year. I think that's as a result of the pandemic we've been through. I think a lot of lads who probably wouldn't bother playing football realise, I can still play on, I can go in and play junior in my club, and the social aspect of that, and the community aspect of it, and being involved in something greater than yourself, I think that's really important. I think a lot of people have done that, and it's really important for the structure of a club that they have their junior C's, their junior B's, junior A's, all the way up along, providing football, because it's within those ranks that they will get the future coaches, the future volunteers, maybe the future club secretaries and chair people will come from those ranks, So you need to keep your player base broad, if you know what I mean, and often that's done within the junior section of the club. Not every one of them are going to be able to go on and play senior football, but they'll enjoy playing at the level they're capable of playing at.
While we talk about clubs, Micheal, one thing that struck me is the number of ladies that have got involved, and I know you mentioned Mary Judge at county level or at football committee level in recent times as well, but even down at club level, there seems to be an awful lot more ladies getting involved in parent clubs, for want of a better word. And of course a lot of talk as well at convention last week about the one club model. I mean, where do you see this going in your 5-year term if it comes to that?
Yeah, I think that's the future is going to be based on the one club model. And I was at the social on Saturday night last for Nevania at Chermore, and interestingly they have a full executive run by the ladies. Roisin Nick Lloyd is the chairperson, Mary Lee Lunchig is their secretary, and Tracy Kelly is their treasurer of their club, and it's a one club model. And as you know, they won the intermediate in both ladies and gents last year, and it was a really, really great night, and see all the young people together after we come out of 2 years of the pandemic, and you can see such the vibrancy that's there in a club like that, and it would lead you to believe that this is the way to go for other clubs going forward, and that the ladies and the gents clubs can work together going forward. And I think the problem, of course, will probably come back again to facilities and pitches and stuff like that. But, we still have those problems as it stands because the ladies' clubs don't have the facilities. And I know our local club here, Chum Carton, are raising funds at the moment to try and provide a pitch for themselves as well. And look, isn't that great? And maybe through the capital sports grants and the government rowing in behind that to promote ladies football and to promote football in general, we'll see more facilities and more pitches in our clubs when we go the one club model going forward.
You talk about club facilities then. I know that you're big on your bucket list is offering support to clubs as well, because you talked about Navan and Letchermore. They've got unbelievable facilities back west, and I got to see those firsthand in the build up to their county final. But there's other clubs not so lucky, and money is always the biggest issue. And then of course you're talking about land acquisition and all that goes with it as well. Is there anything practical you can do as football committee chairman to go out to clubs and to talk to them and offer them support as regards where they could come up with finance, or offer them ideas?
Yeah, actually, and I've been coaching officer for the past 5 to 6 years, and we do actually go to the clubs in coaching in the club support programme. In fact, I'm going with Dennis Carr, our games manager, tomorrow night to Renval, a club that had experienced its own problems. It's so far out, and it has a difficulty getting our own clubs to go out and actually play them out there, which is it's sad really to think that they're struggling out there and they're having to face cancellations because our own clubs won't go out and play them. A lot of that, I suppose, is clubs trying to get through Galway City on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening, traffic and everything else like that. But it is important that we do support them, and we're going out there tomorrow evening to see what's going on in that, and to administer the club support programme, which is an excellent programme run through the coaching and games, where they go out and they see what the club has. They do an audit of their coaching, they give them support to show them how to run sessions, they come back and they mentor the coaches and all of that. And it's a great programme, initially devised by Cathal Craig and Connacht, and fair play to Cathal and the support they're providing through that club support programme. An excellent initiative.
Let's finish the conversation by talking about the county, because we have given loads of time to the club, which is more than appropriate. But, we've heard in the recent years as well about the division of the calendar between club and county. I mean, that has to be a positive going forward. But as things stand for this year, it's very much all about the county now. There's a National League ongoing. We're getting ready for a championship clash next month with Mayo in Castlebar. On that point, I mean, we heard from Pádraig Joyce yesterday. We're still a bit of limbo as regards understanding whether that match will go ahead in the newly laid pitch in Castlebar or not. But all things being equal, let's look at the county senior team first and the progress you see. And you've been involved in player development and coaching as well in recent years. Are Galway developing the right kind of county footballer, and how do we compare with our neighbours Mayo, who seem year in year out to be thereabouts in the race for Sam Maguire?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at it, Ollie, up to minor over the last number of years, and the academy's gone down to the Ted Webb, we've had excellent coaches involved, and we've got excellent results all the way up along. We're producing the players up to there, and this year in particular is my first year now being involved at senior level. I've travelled to Newry with the team. My first day out I was in Páirc Uí Chaoimh with them as well. Yesterday's performance against Offaly wasn't the best in the world. They got the result though, which was very important. And I just think there's a great atmosphere in the camp at the moment, and everything seems to be positive. Now they have all the points they can get, but the serious challenges do lie ahead. We have Clare here in Tuam Stadium next Sunday. That'll be a big game for Galway. Clare will put it up to us, I would imagine. So hopefully we get over that. Then we travel to Derry, and our final game is against Roscommon in the Hyde. 3 big challenges, and as you rightly mentioned, the big one then is to come against Mayo. Preparations are going well, as I can see within the camp. And we have the players. I believe we have the players, and if we get the performance out of them, maybe we'll give enough to Mayo as well on April the 24th. But let's wait and see. Just getting back on the academies then, Ollie, I was very involved in that as coaching officer. And this year, I can tell you, we have great people involved. In Ted Webb in the north, we've Jaf Fallon and Derek Savage coming in this year with James Mannion. And it's great to see those lads coming back in and giving back into Galway football, and they will provide a great atmosphere. They were in Bacon now in the Centre of Excellence down there on Saturday, and they had the guys in the west there as well, and Michael Donlan from Corofin, excellent coach as well, with Kieran Collins and others are involved there in the west. The likes of Sean Ogdepuer are coming back, getting involved in our academies as well. I think that augurs well for Galway football. But great work has always gone in the academies, in my opinion. That a lot of unseen work goes in there, and we have the footballers coming through there. It's to get the, and I think this is really, really important, and a lot of emphasis needs to be placed on that age group from 18 maybe to 22, 23, when they really become senior footballers at that stage. And I know Donald O'Fahert has done great work there with the under-20s and Alan Glynn with the under-17s. It's important that we kind of link them all up though. That's what I would see as something that we could look at as a policy in Galway football, where we all tend to work in our own silos. We work there, and if you're the manager of one team, that's your main goal in life, is to get that team to perform. But for a Galway football going forward, we need to link all these up. So as we're playing a kind of football, we're producing, as you said there, the kind of player we want to produce. What can we be doing differently, and can we talk to each other and get that out there? And I think that's something we could focus on for performance in Galway football going forward.
And of course, the one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that link between county teams and schools, which for me seems to have been ignored consistently in recent decades, and yet we've watched other counties successfully, like Kilkenny for instance, with with some of their nurseries like St. Kieran's, Kilkenny, CBS at hurling level. At football, again, you don't have to go far to look down to Kerry, to Tralee, CBS, St. Brendan's, Killarney. Is that something that maybe you as football committee chairman can now look at with the resurgence of St. Jarlath's this year, Colossia, Ballia, Clore with the huge numbers and their likely success to come in recent years as well? Just to name two schools that you might take that on board and look at how that model can be built into the county setups.
Yeah, I'd agree actually, Ollie, that it's an area that we do need to concentrate on. But this year was actually a particularly good year for us, and I think it's down to some of the good work that was done by our new games manager, Dennis Carr, when he set up the leagues for the Galway schools this year, where they were played down in the Dome. And you saw coming through from that then Jarlath's winning the Connacht A, Geraghty winning the B, and St. Paul's Oughterard winning the C competitions. Okay, they didn't progress when they went out of the province, but it was a great achievement nonetheless to win all three. And I think it was down to maybe running off those leagues pre-Christmas that they were playing football, and the Dome was a great venue obviously to kick it off in. I think it's something we need to focus on going forward. We had on the back of that, of course, then NUIG won the Sigerson, which was a great boost to us as well, and GMIT got the Trench Cup. They got to the final. I think their opposition Dundalk IT didn't turn up. I know Tom Hughes was particularly disappointed with that, but I think that kind of is an area that we can pick some low-hanging fruit, as it were, from the colleges if we concentrate in that area. And the national schools, when we talked about club development earlier, we need to create the club schools link. That's huge for development of players, so that that there's feeder schools feeding into the clubs, and the clubs know where these young fellas are, and they're bringing them through, maybe through the cool camps and stuff like that. They can identify their players and bring them through. It's a huge area of work. It's something we'll concentrate on, Ali, going forward.
Micheal, thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you very much.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.